This is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen to these conversations. And, I'm trying to find my way through this pandemic situation and working from home and recording these conversations. And what I really miss, I want the listeners, I want you guys out there all to understand that I really miss sitting down in the same room with these people. It's to me, it's the fuel that really gets me going is these human interactions. And for me to be recording these with people remotely, it's one thing to do it with friends and it's okay, but it's a challenge to do these in a way that keeps it alive with inspiring people remotely. So we are recording this via Google Meet. And so last night I watched the Dave Chappelle episode of David Letterman's Netflix series, My Next Guest Needs No Introduction. And David Letterman had said that his guests are always way smarter than he is. And I have a feeling that today's is going to be that situation for me. I had the honor of seeing Yanci speak at our school's Friday forum, where she spent 35 minutes helping young people understand the importance of designing their own careers and understanding that, mapping out your life is sort of an important thing to do, and some really, really interesting considerations. Just so you don't know, if you didn't do your homework on Yanci, she's a senior experienced designer at Autodesk. She's in Portland, Oregon. At Autodesk, she crafts tools and workflows that make life easier for developers who want to bring new possibilities to life based on their 3D modeling, visualization, and data insight software. Yanci is also an ADP List design mentor, coaching designers to identify their goals, craft their skills, present their work, and grow their career. And she is design chair of Portland Advertising Federation. Yanci's past experience includes 3.5 years as experienced designer at AKQA, working on Nike, PayPal, IBM, Trade Desk, and Palms. Beautiful stuff for Palms, really cool. She's also has been a UX UI designer at her alma mater, Virginia Commonwealth University, and experienced design intern at 360i. She graduated from VCU Brand Center. This is crazy, like recently, in 2017, in experience design. She also graduated from VCU undergrad with a minor in psychology and a major in graphic design. Yanci, welcome.
Thank you. For some reason, when you read my resume, it feels impressive. It feels more impressive than who I really am, I think.
Yeah, I've done a couple of speaking things, and when people go through it and they do their homework to assemble those facts, you never really spend the time to stand back and look at what you've done, right? Generally, so when you start to hear it, it's sort of like, okay, yeah, maybe I am doing okay. Maybe things are working out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we tend to self-criticize a lot.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I think we focus on the things that we didn't do well. We tend to focus on our goals and the next thing I want to achieve. But when someone else is reading your history and you are able to observe it from a more objective perspective.
Yeah, I always wondered how many good things have to happen to you to offset the one bad thing that you hear about yourself. So someone can compliment you all day. Is that number 10? Because it's probably infinite, because that one negative thing is the one thing that keeps you up, that gets under your skin. I think that's sort of part of the condition, I think, of a creative person. So I do have some questions for you. These are conversation starters. I have to say to listeners, so today I'm hoping for this. I'm hoping for this conversation to be a casual, rainy day chat. It is rainy outside here in Atlanta.
Oh, it's raining in Portland.
Yep. Is that newsworthy? Isn't that the case? Is it rain there like it rains in Seattle? Is it rainy there a lot?
Yeah, it starts, I'd say like a couple of weeks ago, and it's just going to rain every day.
Right.
And in summer, there's no rain at all, and there's fire.
Lovely, lovely. All right, so you have a really interesting strategic approach to everything. And I was wondering, when I read your bio and looked at some work, I had a couple of kind of serious questions about you and what I'm going to get to the questions in a second. But then I watched your autobiographical video, your little About Me video, and not only had you answered those questions, but you had actually asked those questions, which is to me extremely interesting, that you have this way of identifying questions. And I think that's actually a really interesting philosophical approach to life. And have you always been a person who wondered and was curious and asked those questions and analyzed? Is that sort of part of your own personal DNA?
I think so. I think I'm just I like to think, which can be a good thing and bad thing. I think at work, thinking deep is good. Helps me to notice things that are overlooked, pay attention to the details. But in life, overthinking can be a little bit taxing sometimes. But I find myself like I think I'm a very curious person. I'm very inquisitive. One of my favorite things to do is to basically Google things and read Wikipedia pages. Um, yeah, and I think it's like I just tend to like dive deep into the root of the problem. Like sometimes people will ask me to execute something, and I can do that, but my mind just tend to want to like ask more questions like why are we doing this, like what is the purpose of this, like are we trying to solve a business problem, and is this a temporary solve or is it a permanent solution, and sometimes I can get myself into the rabbit hole and open up a whole new like set of issues. Yeah, and yeah.
Is that have you in your short career so far, have you been in environments that welcome that sort of critical analysis? Because when you started that by saying that someone can ask you for a solution, and you can do that, but right.
Mhm.
So there are certain cultures, certain advertising cultures, or even marketing, design, and solution corporate cultures that would call those questions pushback, right? That's not really welcome. So have you been in environments that are welcoming of that sort of critical analysis at that point? And like, how do you manage to, as a young person starting your career, share that voice or opinion in those moments when the expectation is you're just going to go ahead and design this thing?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Because I started out as a like junior or mid-level designer, experience designer at AKQA, and the team was pretty sincere. And I'm like an introvert in nature.
Mhm.
I'm not the loudest person in the room, and English is not my second language. So I'm like always just more of a listener than a speaker or leader. Um, and but I tend to think deeply, and oftentimes I will like write them down. I will keep those thoughts to myself, and then try to listen and observe the environment and see who are in the room and what is the general vibe, and then find opportunities to voice out, like find your ally, and you can just feel it, like this person is probably questioning the same thing, and then, sometimes you speak up in the meeting, sometimes you grab a coffee with person after the meeting. It's not, there's no formula. It's based on the environment, the culture of the company, and your relationship with your coworkers.
This is so interesting to me. Do you think that you're a multicultural creative, so you have Chinese heritage working in the States, right? So do you think that the fact that English is your second language, that you're maybe a little bit less comfortable, has been that sort of superpower because it forces you to be less forward. It forces you to be more observant. It forces you to know to think about your place, where someone from a position of privilege or not in an underrepresented group, someone in a power dynamic, doesn't even take the time to think about those sort of issues, and they can steamroll sort of the entire process. So now that we're talking about it, I'm wondering if that has sort of been not a gift, but sort of a tool for you that has actually enabled you to work the system in a more effective way.
That's interesting. That's such a good perspective. I mean, I think I always thought that my this, I don't know, like introspective or something like this, is like a is it like a drawback? Because I feel like the American culture rewards like extrovertness. Is that a
Mhm.
word? Extrovertness?
Extroversion. I don't know if that's a word. I know what you mean though.
Yeah,
Brash, being brash and bold. Yeah.
like, yeah, bold and confidence. But I think actually, I was just going through my current manager at Autodesk. We're going through our culture code with me the other day, and one of them is humble. I think it's important, really, to be humble. And
Well,
yeah.
being humble is to me what that word means is that you're listening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it also means that you're not always focused on yourself. Like you are not always in the center of things. It's not just about you, it's about everybody in the room. It's
That's
about the big picture.
really interesting. So I want to come back to the questions that I was going to ask you that you answered, but first I want to get a little bit more practical about this job and what you do. So can you talk really quick about what it means to do experience design? Because you had said, I heard you say the last time you spoke that you don't identify really as being a really strong visual designer, although I would argue that with you. I would think that you are a very good visual designer, but that's not what the word design sort of means to you, right? So what does design mean, and what does your job sort of encompass?
Yeah, what does design mean? I think design is it's about acting with intention. It's about solving a problem, and build systematically. And you're building a system, and you are navigating between among all the constraints, and with all those stakeholders, and you're trying to arrive to a place with a clear purpose.
Mm.
You know,
So
yeah.
when you talk about constraints, those sort of challenges are that's the fun part, right? That's the puzzle part.
Hmm.
So um, your actual practical job, where do projects come from? Is the solution sort of already considered, like we need to do this app? Or is the solution that we need to figure out how to help people navigate this space? And maybe it's an app, maybe it's something. Um, to, and this is, I guess, a little bit, we're talking about the relationship when you're at an agency like AKQA. And then I want to shift to talk about what it's going to be like now, the new job. But at an AKQA, the projects that you guys are working on, I don't want to say the solution already considered, but is it generally already leaning, or the inertia is already pulling it towards some sort of solution that's probably going to be an app? It's probably going to be a web page, or is there more flexibility to solve those things in fresher ways? Does that make sense, the question?
Yeah, yeah. I think in terms of product design in general, the client will come in with a brief. So they already know. I think clients think that they are familiar with their business, and they know what they want. And I think AKQA is really innovative. It's not a production house, and the teams there really try to do the right thing. And we would do our own research. We always fight for more research hours, and then we try to look at their company as a whole and try to find the best solution for them. And maybe maybe they don't need a website, maybe they don't need an app, maybe the problem can be solved by changing, I don't know, the tone, how they talk to their customers. And it is challenging sometimes to help the client to see what they actually need. And sometimes, the clients will come in with a temporary solve, like a patching the holes. And we were just like, okay, like this is not the root problem. Like if you solve the root problem, just invest a little more, and then you're not going to be revisiting this over and over again, So we try to dissect like their business and try to solve their business problem.
That's super fun. That's really cool. So you got to work on some really interesting brands there too. You got to work on PayPal, IBM, the Palms. I'm not going to say it again. It's just breathtaking stuff. Nike. Let's talk about now. You're going to be working on Autodesk, and it's going to be Autodesk next week, and the week after that will be Autodesk. So what's the upside for someone considering going into? Why would you leave the variety of an AKQA to go work on one account at one client? What's the benefit of that for you personally and professionally? Because I'm assuming you didn't run away from AKQA. You're running to something else, right? You're not running away. So what was the two that you were running to?
Yeah, it was a hard decision because I think like when I was in AKQA, I got to work on different projects, different brands and industries, and it was super fun. And it kind of, that environment kind of made you like really creative and very productive. But I think one thing that seemed was lacking, or in my, at least from my perspective, is this kind of you don't get this. I would say like the projects can be short, and then you are serving for the agency. And sometimes, like for example, I was designing this website, and then when the contract ended, like when the hours are used, and then I just need to stop and we ship the product, and then I don't get the chance to follow up with the product and to monitor the metrics and iterate on the design. And you got put into a new challenge, which is awesome. But like I mentioned in the beginning, I tend to want to like dive deep into things, and I want to solve the root problem. And in an agency environment, I think it's a little bit hard for you to stick, kind of grow with the company.
That makes so much sense to me. It reminds me of an old analogy. My first job out of college, I worked in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, for a TV show. And at the end of this, when the series wrapped, at the end of the series, people were kind of approaching me for projects afterwards, but they were the same role. There was no growth. And I always thought of that experience, a very freelance experience. It's like you're collecting these little hills, but you're not building a mountain. You're not collecting a sort of an experience. You're not able to dig deeper, not able to build upon things. That's a fascinating truth, what you said, because they are managing the future. They are managing the breadth and depth of their brand or their messaging or their functionality or everything. Whereas the agencies are just doing one project. That's really, really interesting. I had never heard it described that way. So I had heard it described that like when you work for a client and you have an idea, you're much more able to like get it done. You can make it because you don't have to work your way through an agency and then get approval and blah, blah, blah. This way, if you have an idea and a thought while you're walking your dog in the morning, you can bring it into work and you're going to have someone that could possibly hear you, that's really interesting. So I want to shift a little bit to sort of your mindset. So I'm looking at your website. This is also the cool thing about doing these during a pandemic, is I can actually look at a screen while we're talking, because when we're meeting, it's just rude for me to turn and look at a computer. So I can look at your face, and then literally 2 inches away is this list of things that you do on your website. So UX research, persona creation, journey mapping, concept ideation, wireframing, UI design, motion design, rapid prototyping, user testing, technical specification, HTML, CSS. So you know HTML? That's kind of nerdy.
Yeah, I took a class in college.
Okay. Brand design, photography, video shooting, and editing. Things I love. Our planet. Thank God someone loves our planet. Healthy living, cooking and fermentation, wild food foraging, mushroom cultivation, gardening, animals, plants, and microbes. Animals, plants, and microbes.
Yeah.
Okay. Being in the present. We talked about meditation for a second earlier. Philosophy, anthropology, two of my favorite things in the world to talk about. Compassion,
Mm.
financial literacy. I want to talk about that in a minute too. Emotional intelligence, quantum physics. So what the hell? Do you know your own brain? Like, do you have like an amazing balance of right brain and left brain? Do you have an understanding of your own mind and thinking? You clearly do, because you talked about that in that video. And where do you prefer to lean, or do you have to have both? Do you prefer to lean into analytic problem solving, or do you prefer to lean into a paintbrush and messy creativity? And does one of those feel less comfortable to you?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was younger, I definitely was so intimidated by all the like science stuff, analytical stuff, and I consider myself to be a right-brained person, like very emotional. My sign is Cancer, by the way, if anyone cares.
When is your birthday?
July 14th.
Okay, I'm July 17th, Cancer
Oh
as
my
well.
God, Cancer power.
Yeah.
And there are a few like artists in my family, like my aunt, my grandmother, my father. They're very good painters and creative. And yeah, I thought I was basically very sensitive and emotional. And then so that's why I went to art school.
People have accused me of being sensitive, and I think they use it in a negative, pejorative way. I like to think of it as a valuable trait.
Mm.
I like to think of being sensitive as a valuable trait, but some people
Yeah.
aren't comfortable with sensitivity. But whatever.
Yeah. Like I get sentimental sometimes, but I feel like our culture kind of values more like rationality, like critical thinking, and like it's not professional to show your emotions. So yeah, I went to art school. I wanted to be a sculptor because I love to create. When I was at VCU, Art Foundation, I find myself like pulling all-nighters creating like sculptures all the time. And it's amazing. Like I was just like, I just want to express something deeper. Sometimes it's about life, it's about, like some philosophy. Um, and interestingly, I didn't choose to major in sculpture because there's also a very pragmatic side in me. And I thought that, okay, like how much money do sculptors make? Like what's the job market looks like? And
Right.
then I went with graphic design because I think that's the most practical track in the art school. I can be I can basically like um, so I can be a visual communicator. I can solve problems visually for companies. Like I was very passionate about animal welfare, and I wanted to work for PETA and create those powerful posters. And I think as a graphic designer, and also that's why I studied psychology. I think I want to understand human mind, how they perceive things, how they so how I can like change their mind, and
Yeah,
use a visual power to really tell stories.
that's really, really cool. Do you think so? You were intimidated by science. Is there something about the culture you grew up in that didn't that it was about? Was that a gendered thing? Because in the U.S., I think that we don't really we have historically not respected girls in science. Was that part of the challenge there or not? Or is it just personally it was just like, hard to decipher?
Yeah, I think I was really just yeah, the education in China was very science focused, science
Hmm.
and math focused. Um, yeah, and I was really bad at all those courses. And it just kind of like damaged my self-esteem early on.
Interesting.
I
That
was
sucks.
I thought I was not good at any of the analytical stuff. But as I became a graphic designer and as I learning more was learning more about experience design and problem solving, I realized that they're just fascinating. Like I follow Elon Musk and I read about science, and I just feel like it resonates with me more when I see it as a passion and not as something like a course that I have to get a high score.
Well, it's best when you understand that science is explaining reality.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not about formulas and mathematics. It's about explaining reality. It's
Mhm.
what's happening. So here's a question that you don't have to answer if you don't want to. And I don't know if this came out of. I'm so bad at remembering where things come from. I know it came off of this screen. I don't know if it was your forum or someone else's, but there was something really fascinating that came up talking to students about, and I'm probably kind of like evolving / morphing what the message was to fit my own needs. But what it was having students understand, anyone, frankly, in life, understand what other people think of them, right? So
Mm.
that if somebody, because I had heard something on this forum about like what is a teacher or a mentor or a reference going to say about you? What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, right? And I had just come off of a reference call from an agency about a former student, and they'd asked me these questions, and I talked to them for 10 minutes about this student. And when I hung up the phone, I wonder if this student even knows what people are saying about them when people ask, right? So, and I think people go through school and they have this life, frankly, they have this impression of how they come across. Do you spend any time thinking about what peers say about you, or what, or how you're perceived, or the image that you put out? Because there's part of that in your video that talks about, in your Who is Yanci video, that talked about how who you are and what you stand for and all those kinds of things. I wonder if that's something you've ever spent any energy thinking about.
Yeah, I think we tend to criticize ourselves a lot. We tend to focus on the things that we don't do well. For example, like I think I think I'm like very, very picky. Like I'm very particular about things. I'm like, like some people are like low maintenance. I don't think I'm like that because I tend to overthink. And I'm also a worrier. I worry about things. I'm very type A.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also like have a lot of good traits. I just don't think about them because there is no point of think about them, right? As humans, we tend to focus on our problems, and then it's just like it has some evolutionary benefits.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. The evolutionary benefit. Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying.
Interestingly, when I asked my friends, what do you think of me? It's funny. Okay, like I just asked one of my friends, like, how would you describe me? And he said, I think you're funny and goofy. I'm like, what? I'm goofy? And he
Interesting.
said, yeah, you are very particular and very sensitive, and very thorough, very curious, inquisitive. Yeah, we see ourselves differently than other people for sure.
Oh God, so true. All right. So speaking of friends, I'm going to shift a little bit to professional relationships. How do you prefer to collaborate? What's the ideal? Because one of the things I really loved about your website was that you talked about the team and you talked about your role on those teams. So it made me wonder, what's the ideal scenario when there's a large sort of problem to tackle? What's the ideal scenario, and how do you like to work? Do you like to spend time bouncing ideas back and forth? Do you like to spend time by yourself? What has worked for you, and have you found that to be possible
Mhm.
in the working environment?
Yeah. So I always think I'm most productive when I'm left alone for a while. Like I will just like show me what are the problems, and then I'm going to like go into my own world. I'm going like a cancer. I'm going to like hide from the outside world. I'm going to dive really deep. And I'm also I'm not the fastest problem solver, like because I tend to like just peel the onions layer by layer, and maybe it would take other people like 2 hours, it will take me 5 hours. And I'm more than happy to stay late or work some hours on weekends because I enjoy it. And then I want to get a good understanding of the whole picture of every components. And then I will feel more confident and comfortable to open up and have a conversation with my colleagues. Because if I don't do my homework and I just got put into a conversation and I feel like, oh my God, like I wish I have just more understanding of the background, I don't feel that I'm empowered enough to speak up.
Interesting. I think there's actually science around where ideas come from, and this is going to sound crazy for a guy who teaches it at ad school and teaches a teams class and talks about collaboration, but pretty sure I read that the ideas come from those moments when you're sort of really just thinking deeply and looking at a tree. And when you're alone and you've started to assimilate all the data starts to kind of form and coalesce, you have these moments. And I do remember when I was learning my craft as a writer and an advertising guy, when I would sit with my partners, those were the moments the ideas came from, was when we were kind of quiet. When we were staring at a corner or a fly on the wall, literally, and I would say, well, what if it's this, right? That moment of what if it's this is almost never coming off of a back and forth. The back and forth is just more fuel. It's actually the collaboration and the team is just dumping more data into your mind for things that you can assimilate and coalesce around. So that makes sense what you're saying, going off and spending time alone. What's your favorite part of the whole process? What's your favorite thing to do? Is it the front end thinking and the strategic planning? Is it the wireframe mapping? Is it the actual design and execution of it? What or something else? What's your favorite part of the process?
I think my favorite part of the process is I think it's more like the upfront part. Like when I realize that, oh my gosh, like this is a problem and this is a real problem. And it's when at the moment when I find out that the real problem is not the problem that everyone else is thinking. And this is a key. And then and also I like concept ideation. When you go broad, like the double diamond design process in the first diamond, when you are doing divergent thinking, like concepting. Actually, yeah, I like divergent better. In the first diamond is the research part. You research, discover the problem, and you converge. And moving to the second diamond, you start concept ideation, like design explorations. That part is so fun, and you can go crazy about it. And then you have to present to the stakeholders, and then they will kill like 99% of the cool ideas, and you converge. And you're like, oh my gosh, the fun part is over.
That's so funny. It's interesting, those diamonds. So for the listeners that aren't privy to this, it's a left and right. You have these two diamonds where you start off at a point and then you separate out to do some ideation and discovery, come back together and focus. I actually love to add a third diamond, which is sort of the exploration of the execution. So once you kind of have a great idea and you figured that, okay, this is the idea, you can then have sort of the opportunity to like iterate language, iterate graphic design solutions, and open it up again to sort of this exploration phase, which I think is really critical. And I say that a lot for students because I feel like that they do the hard thinking about strategy, they do the hard thinking about concept, but concepts on their own aren't the things necessarily that get people jobs. I mean, what gets people jobs is that perfect expression of it, visual and language expression of it. So shifting gears again, back to this, you mentioned financial literacy. So you had said something that haunted me on your forum. You said, you don't want to have to be working at 60, right? So how far into your own future have you mapped? Like how far into the future have you sort of designed from an intellectual perspective your own career?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. Yeah, I think some people definitely like map out their 5-year, 10-year plan, and I like to be a planner. I have a lot of to-do lists, but I'm also very flexible. Like my mind is always changing. Like I'm thinking totally different now compared to a week ago before I started the Autodesk job. I think before I was prioritizing work-life balance and like optimizing my life and health and mental growth, intellectual growth, and but now like I'm in this brand new whole new organization and this new team and tackling a very different problem in a very like just foreign problem space for me. We're designing for developers, and there is so much to be learned, and it really intrigued me to kind of just like, oh, like give me all the knowledge.
That's
And
great. It's like you've been like recharged in a way. It's
exactly
really fun to hear.
inspired. There's like this new challenge I'm facing. So I don't know, like, oh, do I really want to like retire? Like if I retire, I can go pursue my, quote unquote, true passions. And I can volunteer and I can spend more time with my family. Like I can go travel and maybe start my own company. But now I'm working for this corporation. But, maybe you can turn anything into your true passion. Like if you dedicate enough effort and like energy in it.
I believe that's very true. And I believe sometimes opportunity is where you don't even notice it. I think sometimes people are unhappy at their jobs. There's ways to shift their thinking and turn some places into opportunity where you didn't even see it, just by shifting the way you approach relationships and opportunities.
Totally.
Do you have any desire to work on cause work, stuff that matters, like working on maybe climate pieces or outside projects that have to do with more making the world a better place? Is that something that's on your list of?
Yeah. I think there are three things I'm passionate about. One is financial education. I think from my experience, a lot of my peers are not very financially literate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's very important, like, to have a deep understanding about money. What does money mean? Money means time, and we have a very intimacy relationship with money, and that can be traced all the way back to our childhood. Yeah, there's psychology around money.
A lot.
Yeah, and I want to help people understand that and build a healthy relationship, and so they can use money as a tool to empower their life, to optimize their life. Another thing I'm passionate about is health. I think a lot of people don't like eat or sleep in a, like, I don't want to be like too negative, but I want to help people to know like the importance of sleep and to eat healthy. And how can that like affect your mental state to help you to be more creative, to feel less anxious, more centered, and just feel better, be a healthier person mentally, physically. Another thing is the environment, and the ecology. Like how do we live a life that is sustainable, and how do we like kind of dissolve those habits like overspending, like not like, I don't know, spending too much time on social media, establishing like healthy habits that's good for you and good for the planet. I try to be a minimalistic. I almost don't spend money at all. I grow my own vegetables.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I forage mushrooms in the forest. Yeah.
I'm inspired. I think you're going to do it. I think you're going to change the world. Yanci, thank you so much for talking. I really appreciate it. It's really, it's a great way for me to start my day. I really appreciate your insight and your intelligence. It's so refreshing. Listeners, check out more from Yanci at yanciwu.com, YANCIWU.com. By the way, I was curious what Wu means, and Wu is a dialect, right? Is Wu is it a dialect and also a group of people, or is it simply just a language?
It's my last name. It's my family name.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's actually Yanci it's an English pronunciation of my Chinese name. So in Chinese, you say 吴燕慈. 吴燕慈. Wu is my family name. 燕慈 is my given name.
Is Wu like in Italy where they have names based on regions? Is that a regional name?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe in the beginning. I'm not,
Right.
and there's like this family tree. It can be traced back like thousands years ago.
Yeah, it's insane. We didn't even get into the cultural part, which is to me fascinating. Fine, I'm going to go there. I'm going to ask you this question: How much Chinese culture do you carry with you on a daily basis?
I think
Like, have you been westernized mentally, or are you kind of still leaning into sort of your family heritage when you approach your craft, your life?
I think maybe like half and half. Things I like about American culture is, I think it's autonomy. Am I saying it right? Autonomy.
Yes, you are. You are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just the freedom of expressing your own identity, like your uniqueness. And I know that in Chinese culture, like people tend to conform to the standard, the mainstream, and you don't want
which works well in a pandemic. Works well in a pandemic.
Exactly. Yeah.
But,
it's funny. There's a saying called 枪打出头鸟, meaning that in a crowd of birds, like if you stick out and you're more likely to be shot by a hunter.
Oh my God, that's
yeah,
scary.
that's scary.
That's so true, though. That's such what incredible philosophical foundation too, that certain beliefs are just endemic, just sort of baked into the way you approach life. It's really fascinating. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And my approach to life and work is pretty like low. I'm like more risk adverse, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have both tools. You can reach for an arrow when you need to, which is kind of cool. That's pretty interesting. So back to what I was saying, it's yanciwu.com. And listeners, also, you can see pictures and follow me on Instagram at DGMS Podcast. Podcast is also on Spotify. I've said that before. I'll say it again. You can reach me also at Dan's Podcast at mac.com. It's my electronic mail address. It's free to send emails, so go ahead, send me one. Let me know what you thought. Appreciate that. Yanci, thank you so much. Such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure.
Bye.